So I've been talking a lot about the postseason and Stanley Cups, and the question is asked in my last video. Well, why didn't I talk about the undefeated streak that the Blackhawks went on during the 12-13 season? Because for me, it's the big picture. They win the Stanley Cup. That's championship. If I'm going to get into regular season stuff, that's different. So this is my way of explaining it through a new video. Top 10 most dominant regular season teams that I've seen in my generation. So I'm not including teams in the 70s, 60s, 50s, and before because I didn't watch them. I can see numbers and I can go, oh, look, they look really dominant, but I didn't see it. So I can't say for sure because there's going to be teams that I have in this thing. You're going to go, wait a minute. Why is that team lower? Why isn't that team higher? Why is this team so high? Because I watched. And there are certain teams that have an intimidation factor to being number one in the NHL, and there's certain teams that don't. And so I had to go through the numbers and go, okay, well, these ones qualify and these ones don't, and there'll be arguments at the end of this. That's just how it works. So top 10 most dominant, and they have to have won the President's Trophy. They have to have been number one in the league, and if they predate the President's Trophy, okay, but they still have to have been number one overall. I don't think any of these predate the President's Trophy. And then you can go through and find out how many of them didn't win the Stanley Cup. It's a large number. Speaking of which, at number 10, I have the 2009-2010 Washington Capitals, who won 54 games. Really good winning percentage. Very good team going into the playoffs. There were a lot of people who picked them to win the Stanley Cup. That, I think, is the year that the Capitals were picked by a lot of people to win the Stanley Cup. That's probably the year that they were most favored to win it. And it didn't work. At number 9, and I kind of agonized over this one a little bit, is the 93-94 Rangers, who had 52 wins. They were really good from start to finish that year. And, in the postseason, of course, they won the Stanley Cup. Regular season, their record is really, really good. So they're in this top 10 list. But there's other teams more dominant ahead of them. At number 8 are the 12-13 Chicago Blackhawks. Hey, they went half of a season without a loss. The problem is it was a strike-shortened season. And we don't know what would have happened if the other 34 games had been played. That's a lot of hockey. So I can't compare them to teams who've played 80 and 82 games and not take that into account. That the other teams had to play 80 or 82 games, not 48. So Chicago gets on the list. They only had 7 regulation losses that year. And it was quite the run. And for me, they get 8th spot. 7th, this is where it kind of got tough. I'm going to be honest, this is where it gets tough. Calgary Flames, 117 points, 54 wins that year. Of course, famously in the first round, the Vancouver Canucks took them to 7 games. That scare definitely helped Calgary from there on. And I think Vancouver was their toughest challenge along the way. That's my personal opinion. But it was quite the run for them. Mike Vernon was at his best. The whole team from top to bottom was fantastic. And their President's Trophy was awesome for them. At number 6 is the 2015-2016 Washington Capitals. 56 wins. And everybody wanted them to win. But at this point, remember, this is 6 years after the other one I just showed you. At this point, nobody was really picking them to win a Stanley Cup. And this is the frustration of being a Capitals fan. Fantastic. You can't get into a better position than this. And then it fell. And I don't have the 2017 team listed in here in the countdown I'm doing. But you could argue for them a little bit. But this one was a little more dominant than that one. Basically quibbling at this point. At number 5 is the 92-93 Penguins. 119 points, 56 wins. They looked deadly going into the playoffs. Now, they were coming off of back-to-back Stanley Cups that year. So people expected a hangover. The opposite happened. They were fantastic in the regular season. And then the postseason things happened and they didn't win a Stanley Cup that year. This is why I say teams that go all out to finish first overall can really regret it. I think that affected Pittsburgh. I think it went to their heads a little bit. definitely from comments before Game 7 against the Islanders, it seems to have gone to their heads a little bit. And they're here as a dominant regular season team, so maybe that'll make them feel better. Maybe somewhere Mario's going, hey, at least that kid with the cards, he crappily wrote Pittsburgh Penguins and put us at number 5. That makes me feel better about that loss that year. And he'd say kid because, Lemieux's older than I am, so good for him. Number 4, 85-86 Oilers. And like I said, this is where it gets tough. 56 wins that year, 426 goals, did not win the Stanley Cup. But during the regular season, they were just intimidating. 426 goals. Just think about that. Think about the fact that that is double what most teams score now. That a team now scoring 215 to 220 goals is considered to have a decent offense. These guys double it. I know it was the live puck era, but that is a hell of a total. And the Oilers that year were a great team that didn't excel in the playoffs. And number 3, 2005-2006, the Detroit Red Wings with 58 wins. They didn't win the Cup. That's when the laughter got deafening with Detroit, where a lot of fans said, oh, the Detroit dead things, they're never going to win, this is never going to happen. They'd been at the top for about a half a decade, and this was where they peaked, and regular season wise anyways, and they flamed out in the playoffs. It just didn't work. And the next season they would win, and they wouldn't do it with that dominant a performance in the regular season. This is where it gets really hard, though. Or no, 2005-2006. No, they still didn't win. They didn't win that year. I'm thinking of... I'm skipping ahead. They had won the Cup already 3 times at that point. And they lost... I believe it was Anaheim knocked them out in 06. I believe it was Anaheim knocked them out in 06. I'm going to cheat. Sorry, guys. I'm going to cheat. 2005, 2006. Yeah, they lost the conference quarterfinal, which is the first round. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Anaheim. Yep, I'm pretty sure it was Anaheim. It doesn't say in there. So I looked at that for nothing. But yeah, that was a hell of a team. I'm skipping ahead. I'm skipping ahead of myself. Well, then turn the video off and start over. That's not how I work. Number 2 and number 1. So number 2, and really I could make an argument for both, so I'm going to try. The 83-84 Oilers with 57 wins and 446 goals, or the 95-96 Detroit Red Wings with 62 wins. So there's no overtime. There's overtime wins. Stanley Cup winner, not a Stanley Cup winner. Like I said, the laughter was deafening in 96. So every 10 years, there's deafening laughter thrown at the President's Trophy winners, because 2016, of course, was Washington. It is really hard to argue between these two teams, because an argument can be made for both. 131 points. These guys didn't get 131, but they didn't have the overtime games to get there. Yeah, it's nearly impossible to pick between the two, because those 62 wins were fantastic. And this is before the shootout. This obviously is before the shootout. And it was a fantastic season for Edmonton as well. But am I being influenced by the postseason a little bit? Does that make Detroit the best? That's a tough call. I'm gonna say that Detroit gets a mild, little bit of an advantage in my book for their performance in 95-96. Then the Oilers get an 83-84. Although the 95-96 season, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe just a little bit I'm overthinking it. So the 95-96 season, that's an 82-game schedule. They had a .799 winning percentage. There were No overtime losses recorded as overtime losses. Because overtime was in there, but it wasn't officially overtime. It doesn't matter. um. Oh, that's tough. That's tough. And the Oilers that year had. Where are they? Oh, yeah, right. 83, 84, that was before the President's Trophy as well. So let's go back. They only had 18 losses that year, the Oilers. And it's an intimidating record, too, because the Oilers set a goal-scoring record that will never be matched of 446 goals. They had Grant Fuhr and Andy Moog as their goaltenders. Gretzky, Curry, Messier, Coffey, Anderson. And the Red Wings were made of Hall of Famers in the mid-90s. Best regular season performance. I keep going back and forth on this. My original pick was Detroit. I'll stick with that. Detroit at number 1, Edmonton at number 2. You guys can argue in the comment section about who should have been on the list and wasn't on the list, or who was the best between the Oilers and the Red Wings. It's splitting hairs. Let me know how you split them, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and I'll talk to you again soon.